I'm sorry, Erica counts me in as if we're really, hello, good morning. Sorry, we're having a good time ourselves, and we're glad you joined us. It's Jerry LaMotte, and this is Java with Jerry Wednesday morning. It is July 11, 2018. Welcome to the fun we're having. As always, we're coming to you from the penthouse suite of Stadium Towers here in the Platinum Triangle, and of course you know that we're here every Wednesday morning talking about all the news and public policy, and today will be no exception. You can watch this show live. If you are watching it now, you know that, but if you catch it as an audio file on Podbean, or you're catching it on orangeslice.com, don't forget that you can also watch it live on Facebook at 10 o'clock every Wednesday morning, or you can always catch it in those other two media that we talked about, and it's there for your convenience. And go back and look at some of the previous shows. Some of them are really entertaining, and you'll learn a lot too from the guests that we've had. So today, the same format as always. We'll do a little bit of news. We'll then talk to Steve LaMotte, the Chief Executive Officer. I guess he's called the Executive Officer. We'll ask him about his title because it's a little different. For the Orange County chapter of the Building Industry Association, all of you know it as BIA. And we're going to talk about probably one of the most challenging problems that we have in California today. It's been a problem for some time, and that's housing and how we get more of it, and how we can meet the demand, which is seemingly insatiable. So we'll talk to Steve about all of that and about some of the things that he's encountering in his new role there, and a little bit about his background. And then we'll have our special feature at the end of the show. As always, today it's How to Speak Millennial, teaching you boomers to be able to talk to the people that you work with and that you have. So let's go and jump into the news, talk a little bit about it. I usually do national and then state and local, but I'm going to do a little kind of world story today just because all of you have been following it. They got all 12 of those soccer kids and their 25-year-old coach out of the cave in Thailand. Absolutely amazing, Herculean effort by some amazing individuals who out there as volunteers, SEALs from multiple countries, including our own, and they lost a Thai SEAL who was a volunteer. He was bringing oxygen into the cave and lost his life for, ironically, a lack of oxygen, trying to get the heck out of there. So we're sorry for his family, but happy for all of those families reunited with their kids. And for that 25-year-old soccer coach who was a former Buddhist monk who taught those kids to meditate as a methodology for them to conserve energy before their soccer games, that meditation came in handy in the cave. I heard this morning he gave up his own rations of food and water to keep those kids alive. So God bless that kid. So I'm glad that story ended up the way it did, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to congratulate everybody involved in that effort. So good work. All right, let's talk about the national news. The biggest news, if you've been awake at all in the last 48, 72 hours, is the appointment of a second justice by Donald Trump. He named Brett Kavanaugh from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which many argue, and probably rightly so, is the second most important court in the United States, largely because it does so much of the administrative law for the government located as it is in the District of Columbia. But Kavanaugh is a classic originalist who once clerked for the retiring Justice Kennedy, among other assignments. He also worked in George Bush 43's White House and was on staff there for some time. And of course, the left is going insane with all kinds of wild things that will happen to our country if he is in fact confirmed, most of which of course will not happen, and they say that about just about everybody. So it is interesting to see what's going to come of this. I'm sure that there's going to be some effort by some in the body politic who are at the extremes to try to bork Mr. Kavanaugh. He is a pretty bright guy. I'm sure he'll manage that fairly well. And if you're all going insane over the appointment of Kavanaugh, just wait until Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is 85 and I understand not in great health, decides that she wants to step down, or God forbid passes, and he has to appoint someone new. All of you who are going nuts now, you got to get up every morning and check RBG's pulse and make sure she's alive, because you're going to go insane. You'll have a meltdown. Let's talk about state news. State news is sort of local news as well for us, because I want to talk about one of my former hometowns. When I first moved to Orange County, I lived in Surf City, that you all know as Huntington Beach. We locals call it Surf City, and they are pretty aggressively defending their jurisdiction in kind of interesting ways these days. Michael Gates, their city attorney, is not shy about saying, this is my town, and I got my own view, and our council has its own jurisdiction, and he's doing it against the big dog, the state of California, on this sanctuary city policy. We've talked a little bit about that in previous shows, and I think you know what sort of the background is, so I'm not going to delve into that too much because you're aware of it and you guys have been following it. But he's making an interesting argument, and the argument is different than the argument being made by the feds. The feds, as you know, Jeff Sessions and the Attorney General's staff have sued the state of California in federal court and said, you know what, your Prop 54 is unconstitutional. Sorry, we have dominion in this area. It's exclusive jurisdiction. You have no right, state of California, to tell us how to enforce immigration law. So back on back there, you're unconstitutionally infringing. Huntington Beach isn't making that argument. Huntington Beach is saying, well, the state may have a right to talk about its state policy, but we're sort of different than other cities because we're a charter city. We're not a general law city. There's two kinds of cities: general law, governed by the statutes of the state of California; charter, governed by their own charter adopted by the people and governing under that charter. And Michael Gates' argument is, look, we're a charter city. One of the entitlements of a charter city is to do its own policing and have its own police power and determine how it's going to enforce the law. That's what we're doing. If we want to have cooperation with another law enforcement agency, namely the feds, we can choose to do that, and the state has no jurisdiction over how we enforce the law. So an interesting argument is going to be an interesting one to hear. Apparently there was a hearing to set a hearing schedule, and the state just didn't show up. Whoever was supposed to, dial in from Sacramento to be on the line for the status conference in front of Judge Crandall didn't show up, and so Judge Crandall said, yeah, okay, well then here's your briefing schedule, and you all be in court on July 19th. So that's moving a lot faster than the Fed case. And by the way, the state's arguing, City of Huntington Beach, you back up a little bit. We're arm wrestling with Jeff Sessions. Let us figure this out in federal court. We'll tell you what you think. And Huntington Beach is going, yeah, not so much, because we're surfers and we do what we want. So it's an interesting argument. Stay tuned. We'll touch on it a little bit more. The local story, and then I'll bring Steve in, is one that you're all experiencing. I don't know why I'm talking about it, but it's already the unrelenting heat of summer. I mean, what was going on this week? You could fry an egg on the sidewalk. It's finally cooling off down to like the 90s. Yikes. I mean, if you're someone who has to work outdoors, if you deliver things or work on our infrastructure, or you happen to be a crossing guard, or whatever you're doing, hydrate the heck out of yourselves. Try to stay in some shade. Please take care of your dogs and your young kids and your elderly, because it is swelteringly hot, and it's only the beginning of summer. And of course, it's compounded by the fact that we got fires everywhere in the West, right? We got them in Colorado and Utah and Nevada, and Northern California has been ravaged by fire, and we've even had some down here in Southern California, not as bad as we've had in previous years yet, but it's pretty early in the season for us to be baking this hot. All right, enough of the news. That's your Java news. I'm not going to talk about sports, although those of you who are watching soccer, yeah, I know France beat Belgium, and I guess England's playing Croatia today. Are they playing today?
Today.
England. I'm sure if I went right next door and asked Jeff, he would know exactly who's doing what to whom and who he's favoring. But Croatia and England, I think, are playing off, and then you could end up with an English-French match or a Croatian-French match. And so all of you who care about that game you call football, which is not football, there you go. That's your Java sports news. I gave you some. What do you think? And not even football season yet, although I think they have reported to camps now. All right, let me bring in my friend Steve LaMotte from BIA, and while he comes on scene, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He's gathering all his electronics.
All my cords here.
Wiring.
So.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Get comfy. All right. Those of you that know him, but those of you that don't, let me tell you a little bit about Steve. He is the Chapter Executive Officer for the Building Industry Association of Southern California, as I said in his introduction. He works closely with local electeds and government staff, and obviously in that role, to further the BIA's mission to champion housing as a foundation of a vibrant and sustainable community, and let me say any common sense community. So a really important role that you play, Steve, in housing, which is important to us. He's got 8 years of experience in political life. Long before he came to BIA, he was working for several local electeds, including Diane Harkey and Bill Breaux. He spent 5 years working on Diane's staff, and then some years on Bill Breaux's staff in the 73rd District, representing both of them at the local level, enhancing their visibility, obviously, as legislators, but more importantly, having an impact on policies that affected Southern California residents. So he's been very engaged in public policy for a long time. He's a longtime resident of Orange County, a graduate of Cal State Fullerton, so go Titans, and has a degree from there in criminal justice. I don't know how criminal justice and housing work. We'll ask you about that. Don't know how you got there. And he has a master's degree in international studies and political economy from Chapman University. He's married and has one son, and we're glad to have him aboard. Thanks.
Thank you so much. The political side of the master's degree correlates a little bit to what we're doing today. So.
Yeah, your master's makes sense, but the criminal justice one, that
was a long time ago, and you know what? I got to handle criminal justice policy when I was at the state.
Oh yeah, so that makes sense.
Helps a little bit.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, Steve. A little bit about your background and what you were doing for Diane and bill, and how either that influenced what you're doing now, or why you made the change, or if it's different than?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be down here in the district when working for Assemblywoman Harkey as well as Assemblyman Breaux, and so not only you get to learn the state level, but you get to learn about the local politics as well. And so now that my entire career is focused on local politics, it helped a great deal.
Yeah, yeah,
It was a smooth transition from that into the where I'm at the BIA.
And those relationships that you sort of built while you were in those two offices have translated, I'm sure,
very well,
because you know everybody in the elected office.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the difference, though, between housing policy at the state and housing policy locally, because in the local arena is where sort of the zoning decisions are made, and yet housing has become a big deal, and the state seems to be meddling in it a lot more.
Yeah, true. I always say the local politics are, and when it comes to housing, the most important jurisdiction.
Yep.
When it comes to housing.
Land use.
They're the ones who, your local council is the ones who press the button, yes or no, when it comes to creating units.
Yep.
So that's, that's extremely important as we talk about this housing crisis. The state can help, the state can hurt.
Yeah.
But it is these local council members who make the final decision.
Let's talk a little bit about the market in Southern California. We have said for many, many years that we're really hard pressed to have enough housing. And I think some of it is no doubt, and I will give the governor credit on this. Yes, we've got great weather, and yes, we've got, great geography. And so everybody wants to be in California, and they're all flocking here. But the truth is, most Californians, and I picked this up from a talk I heard Lucy Dunn say once at an OCBC evening event where she was speaking, most Californians are the product of Californians, and we're just having a lot of kids, and you young people keep procreating, and we get more Californians, and they all want to live here. So there's intense pressure, but Orange County has always had a housing imbalance. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, first on the population increase, I think we're adding the city of Placentia almost every single year to Orange County, and there's a great statistic by the Concord Group. 75% of the population increase is from within.
See?
So we do say, I do say this at City Council quite frequently, but we're not building for people that are coming in here in record numbers. We're simply building for our family, our kids.
Yeah, and council members, you're building for your constituents that are already in your city.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, but at the local level, we are building. Don't get me wrong. I think 2015 had about 11,000 units built in Orange County, or these were permits pulled. 2016 was about 12,000, but we are seeing a little bit of a decline. Where 2017 we had about 9,000.
But we're not keeping pace at those numbers, right? It sounds like a lot, 11 and 12,000 units, but what do we really need to build, Steve?
Well, we need 100,000 at the state level. We need a lot. Let's put it this way. Orange County, I believe, is about 1 million units. Even if we increase that number by 20%, we would maybe see a 10% decrease in cost alone.
Yeah,
and
it's
that
amazing.
Still doesn't even bring us close to what the median income is here in Orange County.
When you think about the jobs housing imbalance, just think about the 91 corridor and all the people coming from the Inland Empire to come to work in Orange County. It's because we're jobs rich and housing poor, and what we need to do is get more balance. Now, I know Riverside is making a huge attempt at trying to attract business and bring more jobs there to help with that balance a little bit, but we are way under in producing housing units here in Orange County, and that's a serious problem. But there's a lot of things that the state does that also impact that. So let's talk about why housing is as expensive it is and why we can't get more units. I know that you face lots of challenges in housing. Just reel off, if you can, for the listeners, the kinds of things that you encounter on a daily basis that make it more difficult to build houses.
At the local level, probably the number one concern we're facing here at the local level is simply just the regulation. The regulatory climate at the city council level adds significant cost to the eventual cost of the home. Recently we've stated 30% of a home price could simply just be the regulation.
Yeah, and I was astonished by that. At a recent Anaheim council meeting, I heard one of your colleagues, Adam Wood, who's a pal, have a discourse, a little kind of conversation with Dr. Moreno, who's Mayor Pro Tem. And Moreno asked him, what should the actual cost of regulation be? And in the course of that conversation, Adam says to him, well, we're already at 32% cost on the cost of a house for regulation. And I was astonished by that number. The idea that a third of the price of your housing is is tied up only in government red tape just seems insane. And can't we do something just to reduce that? And the irony was, in the course of that discourse, he says to Adam at some point, Dr. Moreno said, well, you could just take that extra cost out of your profit. You don't really need to make a profit. I'm thinking, sure, every business would do that.
Sure. Right? And it's important to note, I mean, probably the number one goal of local BIA chapters, and we have 4 here in Southern California, is to simply reduce the cost to build by combating as well as advocating for cheaper housing costs. Which, just last year alone, the local BIA chapter in Orange County, and we saved the industry upwards of $60 million by combating some of these increases and regulatory climate.
All right, so now there's flavors of the day, and I assume that all the chapters are facing them. Maybe we should back up a step and talk about the chapters. I'm talking about BIAOC because that's the chapter you lead, but there are several others that are all part of BIA Southern California.
So the BIA is, we're broken up into Southern California, so we're actually under kind of this corporate umbrella of BIA Southern California. That's your Los Angeles chapter, that's your Orange County chapter, Riverside, as well as San Bernardino, and each has their own CEO, their own board. My board is, give or take, 34 people within the industry.
Oh, just a handful of people.
Just a small board of directors. But underneath, exactly. So
like
I have 34 bosses. That's really how I look at it. So.
I got one. He's got 34.
But we, so we kind of are, we focus on each of our local chapters, and the region kind of focuses on the regional policy. They help kind of that coordination between us and CBIA, which is California BIA. And at the local level, again, we kind of all face similar issues, but as a region, we have a legal defense team. We have our PAC, the Political Action Committee. Then not only that, but you have CBI, which handles state policy, and then you have NHB, which is our National Association of Home Builders that handles federal policy.
So let's talk about some of the things that have become flavors of the day. There's a huge move in towns, some of them too close to me for comfort, for inclusionary zoning. And that sounds great. We're going to be inclusionary, but really what it does is already, an expensive product becomes much more expensive when you put inclusionary zoning in the product. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of it.
Inclusionary zoning, simply speaking, it is the requirement, whether it's in form of a fee or whether it's in form of on-site, to include affordable housing units within a market rate project.
And by affordable, what we mean is they compress the price of a market rate home. So if a home would normally be $600,000, they say, but if you're going to sell it to the people in this band of income, we're going to make you sell it for far less.
And generally speaking, you can apply them to for sale products, and you can apply them to rental products. It is much more flexible if it's applied to a rental product, because it's much more difficult, obviously, to get an individual to qualify for a low-income housing unit, have the money saved up, have the credit history, and so they're kind of just sitting there on the market. And so it's much, again, it's much more flexible and convenient to have rental housing that is affordable. But it is a problem that we're facing. It does nothing but increase the cost of the other units. And or if, let's say, the policy is already in place, it's just going to lower your land value that you can actually sell the land for. And so what's to encourage an individual to sell that land?
Think about it in sort of the simplistic case of a for sale setting in which you're going to build 100 homes and someone tells you you have to include 15 of them at a really compressed price. You're going to go to your accounting department and they're going to calculate what that cost is, and then they take that cost because you can't absorb it. You have to be able to get a return for your shareholders, right? And you have to make some profit. Sorry, Dr. Moreno, that's the way the economy works in a capitalist society. So they take all of that cost and they spread it to all the market units. So a house that was already hard to afford for a young family becomes that much further from reach.
Well, keep in mind too, we're talking about one more cost increase. Keep in mind your park fees, your fire fees, your traffic fees. The list is literally pages and pages long of just fees, and that's where we kind of come up with this number of 30% of your home is simply just local regulation.
And that's insane. And then rent control now has become a big deal. I know the apartment associations are fighting the rent control issue, and that's great if you're in a rent controlled unit, you already have one, and you get rent control applied to your unit. God bless you, via con Dios. And I just heard a story about a month ago about an old actress. I wish I could remember what her name was or what she played in, but she had been in a rent-controlled New York apartment for some 60 years and never moved from it. And as soon as she moved from there, the rent went from $28 a month, which is what she was paying, to market rate, which was something like, I don't know, $11,000 a month or something. It was ridiculous because she was living in the Upper West Side. So, I mean, it's great if you're in the unit, but it's lousy for everyone else because you dissuade people from building units, and the net result of that is there are less units to build. So all of these things have real market impact on top of this 30% regulatory cost.
But I mean, again, this is the time we're in. Rents going through the roof. I mean, think in Orange County, we're over $2,000 for the average apartment. And,
brutal.
I mean, just to buy a home, you're now looking at $700,000 plus in the median home price.
Yeah, I heard a stat that you have to be making like $146,000 a year in order to avoid the median house in Orange County. It's just ridiculously expensive. And
you're considered low income if you make $90,000 in Orange County. If you make $117,000 in San Francisco, you're considered low income.
I mean, think about that. You're making $117,000 in San Francisco. You're a low income person. So it's insane. And at the state level, there has been some talk about changing some of these regulations, about reform to something called the California Environmental Quality Act, which we in the biz call CEQA. Talk a little bit about that and what the state chapter is working on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our state team, not only our state team, but I think there's buzz on both sides of the aisle is to somehow reform CEQA. There's a Holland and Knight study that really sort of opens the book on CEQA lawsuits and really what they're going after, and a lot of it's public projects, infill projects, going after exactly the type of housing units that we need.
So the irony to that, the state says we want you to build dense housing around transit because that will take cars off of our roads who are already impacted tremendously. Makes sense if you listen to it, but then they make those very developments difficult to do.
Yeah, and anyone can file a lawsuit. It's anonymous. You can file anonymously, which alone I think is where they're kind of going after. But we need to see where the new governor is going to be. We feel that this is going to be kind of a hot topic issue come the new governor, and again, we kind of need that to happen at the state level on top of reforms down here at the local level.
All right, we've talked a little bit about the pressures and the things that you're doing in terms of getting more housing, and let's talk about what you do to different stakeholders. First, I want to talk about the actual electeds that you have intercourse with, because you talk to them a lot, and you have a toolkit, so to speak, of policies that you've suggested that they employ that would make housing more plentiful. Talk about that.
I brought it.
You brought it? Awesome. Show it.
Actually, this is the Housing Futures Initiative, which was actually created back in, I believe it was 2014 by our president, who was Donna Kelly from Lennar at the time.
Hey, Donna.
And she worked with OCBC, even the Kennedy Commission, to really come up with sort of a toolkit of options to really apply to the development process.
But these are common sense things that cities can do now to help you get more housing.
Well, these are what cities can do if they really put their minds to it. A lot of cities, don't get me wrong, are doing it, but like, for example, existing opportunities, I mean, really looking at your general plan. Believe it or not, we're talking about inclusionary zoning in one of your, favorite cities, of course.
Yeah,
but,
my favorite town.
1 year ago, the city of Tustin looked at commercial and how much commercial they had, rezone some of that to residential, really doing exactly what we have been saying to do. We don't need as many commercial locations as we have currently.
Yeah, people are shopping online and they don't need as much brick and mortar, but we do need housing.
Exactly. So on top of that, it's the modernized zoning, which is sort of, we've actually been pushing the small lot ordinance. It's your townhome, it's your condo, and what it is simply it's a single family unit, but if you put it in the form of a townhome, that gives us younger generation, I'm technically a millennial, but it gives a millennial the same opportunity to buy a single family home that really our parents before us had. If you
makes sense.
Exactly. So these are some of the tools
but there's a half a dozen of them. I won't make Steve walk through all of them. They all make sense for those of us who have been around home development and development period for a number of years, and it's available and they can get that from BIA. So
you can get it from us. Hopefully you can put it on your website, but we've actually had several cities include it in their staff reports when they do discuss current policies, and we've had a couple cities actually pass this in the form of a support resolution.
And for those of you cities who are struggling with what to do with this thing, think of BIA as a resource. Steve and his staff will be glad glad to come in and sit and talk to your staff and help you work through some of these things and help you evaluate where you can do good things with housing, because it's their mission as well as yours. So, so that's
We need more.
That's your role with the electeds. Talk about your role with your own colleagues in the building industry. You teach young builders how to be great builders. So talk a little bit about your education program.
Beyond advocacy as well as networking, education is a huge pillar of what the BIA does. We actually have a relatively large next generation group, which we call Next Gen. They have actually been heavily involved within the political circles. They have been involved with with mentorship programs, and we actually connect them with some of the, whether it is, the prior generation of builders in Orange County, and really just trying to close that gap of the workforce. Labor is a huge issue, but really trying to educate these younger generation builders really where to go next.
Right, and they're doing amazing stuff. I don't know if you guys have been out shopping around looking at the new product that's being built, but it really is sort of very very hip stuff that people are coming out of the ground with. And these young builders do need sort of that grounding and sort of the background of the industry, and so it's great work you do. You also, so we talked about the electeds at the state level, talked about what you do with the local electeds, and about your own colleagues in the building industry. Talk about what you do for the community, Steve, because people don't realize that you've been engaged for many, many years and a lot of charitable work, and that you give a lot from the heart. So talk a lot about that.
Actually, I think it was 1989, the BIA Orange County chapter started Homemade Orange County, which has now blossomed into many different chapters nationwide, and they develop and build homeless housing. And so they actually just opened up.
Hello, Scott Larson.
Scott Larson, the executive director, has been there. I mean, I think he's been there almost since inception, but we share offices with them. Again, the BI Orange County chapter started it. They just opened up, a 50-plus bed emergency shelter in the city of Orange. That's now been, I believe it's been about a year now, and really putting sticks in the ground and really going after the problem. And so, and these are, these projects are funded by the builders, built by the builders through their charitable work to the community. So.
And the builders do a lot. You asked my pal Jim Palmer about how much the builders helped him when he was putting the Village of Hope together in Tustin. So a lot of great work. I've got several more questions to go over with you, and no time to cover them all. So I'm just going to give one great big wrap question, and I'm being signaled that you're running out of time. You got to get to the feature. Let's talk about what you see looking forward, though, Steve. We've talked about sort of the pressures you're facing now and the things that you've been doing. When you look out across the transom over the next 5 years, what are the hopeful things and what are the scary things that you see?
Scary things, I think we kind of talked about it, but where are we going to get the units? Really, where are the units going to come from? Even if we were able to create, thousands and thousands of more units, are we really going to see a decline in home costs? And I don't know if that's going to be the case. And so we really do, we kind of were chatting about this before, but we really do need to hear from the grassroots, the individuals who are currently renting, the individuals who want to stay in Orange County and buy a home, the YIMBY organizations. There's actually a Yes in My Backyard group here in Orange County to counter the NIMBY organization. And
can they get hold of BIA and get information about those groups so they know where to meet with them?
They definitely can, and I'll put you in contact, because we need people out there speaking in favor of projects. More often than not, we see projects get delayed or simply denied just based off of the NIMBY presence that shows up to city councils.
They're louder than
they're
the
louder
yes
than us. They're louder than the council itself, and we need to hear from the Yes in My Backyard.
So if people want more information about the toolkits for the cities, or about the YIMBY organizations where they can help get housing costs down and more housing product in, where do they go? What's the website?
Go to our website, BIOC.com.
BIOC.com. Don't miss it. Go there and pick up some of these resources. And if you're really interested in the housing issues, please reach out to Steve and to his staff. Thanks for being here. We'll have you back. We'll talk some more about this stuff. Awesome. All right, I think I have just enough time to do a feature and wrap this thing before everybody shuts me up for the morning. So this week, your feature is How to Speak Millennial. We have a technical millennial, as I guess.
I am a millennial, so I'm on the higher end there.
You're at the high end of the millennial. So today's word, for those who don't know it, we do a word or a phrase for all of you boomers to learn how to speak millennial so that you can be hip. And today's word is adulting. You're going to learn how to adult. All right, that's the practice of behaving in a way characteristic of a responsible adult, especially the accomplishment of mundane but necessary tasks. Millennial use it to describe such things as going to work, grocery shopping, paying your rent. All those things are adulting. So there you go. Now you know what your millennials are doing when they're doing those mundane things that we've all been doing all our lives. They're adulting.
I was just going to say, I think that's just working. So.
I think
that's just going to work.
Working, yeah, just going to work is adulting. So that's our show. We're glad you came and joined us. Please make sure you go to biaoc.com and pick up more information and reach out to Steve and have him help us get more housing. We'll see you next week for another episode of Java with Jerry, 10 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. Until then, have a great week. Make good decisions. Enjoy your adulting. And we'll see you on Java with Jerry next time. So,
cheers.
All right, cheers.